Kim Tae-jun knelt in the empty meditation hall of his family's estate, but peace would not come. 10 years. He had spent 10 years in Baekjusa Temple, from 18 to 28, learning to quiet the mind, to still the body, to transcend the wants of flesh. 10 years of dawn prayers and sutra chanting, of mindful breathing and disciplined silence. 10 years of becoming someone his family barely recognized. And now, his brother was dead. The wooden floor was cold beneath his knees despite the underfloor heating. Everything in this house was modern, comfortable, designed for ease, so different from the temple's austere beauty. Tae-jun tried to focus on his breath. In for 4 counts, hold for 7, out for 8, the pattern that had steadied him through countless hours of meditation. It didn't work, not here, not anymore. Uncle Tae-jun? The small voice shattered his concentration. He opened his eyes to find his nephew Jaewoo standing in the doorway, 5 years old and drowning in grief too large for his small body. Jaewoo-ya. Tae-jun rose smoothly, years of temple training evident in the fluid motion. You should be sleeping. I had a nightmare. Jaewoo's lip trembled. Appa was in it. Appa, father. Tae-jun's chest constricted. His older brother Min-jun had been everything Tae-jun was not: confident, business-savvy, comfortable in the world. The heir their father had groomed to take over Kim Corporation. And now he was gone, killed by a drunk driver 3 weeks ago, leaving behind a widow, 2 young children, and a company that needed leadership. Leaving behind a brother who had dedicated his life to renouncing all of this. Tae-jun moved to Jaewoo, crouching to meet the boy's eyes. Physical comfort did not come naturally. The monastery had discouraged casual touch, but he forced himself to place a hand on his nephew's shoulder. Tell me about the dream. Jaewoo's eyes filled with tears. I couldn't remember what Appa's voice sounded like. The words hit like a physical blow. Tae-jun pulled the child against his chest, feeling Jaewoo's small body shake with sobs. Over the boy's head, he saw Soo-jin, his sister-in-law, appear in the hallway. Her face was gaunt, hollowed by grief and the impossible task of explaining death to children. I'll put him back to bed, Tae-jun said quietly. Soo-jin nodded, too exhausted to speak. She disappeared back toward the master bedroom she could no longer bear to sleep in. Tae-jun carried Jaewoo upstairs to the children's room, where 3-year-old Hana slept undisturbed. He tucked Jaewoo into bed, sitting on the edge until the boy's breathing evened into sleep. Then he sat there longer, watching these children who were now his responsibility. His vows felt like stones in his chest. Celibacy, poverty, obedience. He had broken the third the moment he left the monastery. The second was already compromised. He'd inherited half of Kim Corporation, worth billions of won. And the first he had never truly tested. In 10 years at the temple, he had not thought of women, of desire, of anything beyond the path to enlightenment. He had assumed the training had worked, that he had transcended such base needs, that his body had been disciplined into permanent quiescence, but he had never been tempted, never felt the stirring of want, until today. Welcome to Afro-K Dark Diaries TV, besties. Today's story is about to take you on a journey. We're talking about a Korean Buddhist monk who spent 10 years mastering discipline, control, and transcendence, only to discover he hadn't transcended anything when one Nigerian woman walks into his life and awakens desires he didn't even know existed. If you've ever felt broken, too different, or thought certain feelings were wrong, this story is for you. If you've ever met someone who made you question everything you thought you knew about yourself, drop a comment right now and let me know. The woman had arrived at 2 p.m., exactly as scheduled. Tae-jun had been in his father's study, his study now, reviewing documents he barely understood. Business contracts and financial statements written in a language he'd spent 10 years forgetting. Mrs. Park, the housekeeper who'd served the family for 20 years, had knocked softly. Sir, the curator from the National Museum has arrived. Send her in. He'd been expecting someone older. Someone austere and academic, gray-haired and serious. Someone who would catalog his family's collection of Buddhist artifacts with respectful silence. The woman who walked through the door was none of those things. She was young, close to his age. Her skin was deep brown, rich as polished mahogany, and she wore her hair in intricate braids that fell past her shoulders. Her dress was bright yellow, patterned with geometric shapes, and she moved with an energy that seemed to fill the room. Before Mrs. Park could introduce her, she crossed the space with her hand extended and a smile that showed all her teeth. "Mr. Kim, I'm Ada Okonkwo. Thank you so much for agreeing to this catalog project." Her accent was crisp, educated, with a musical quality that made English sound like a song. "I've been dying to see your family's collection. The pieces you inherited from the Sion temples are supposed to be extraordinary." Her hand was warm when he took it. Small but strong, her grip firm and confident. She shook his hand with enthusiasm, her other hand coming up to clasp his forearm in a gesture he realized was simply friendly, casual, the way she probably greeted everyone. The touch sent electricity up his arm. Taejun released her hand quickly, stepping back. His heart was pounding, actually pounding, in a way it never had during even the most intense meditation sessions. "Miss Okonkwo, welcome." "Oh, please call me Ada. Miss Okonkwo makes me sound like my mother." She laughed, a full, unrestrained sound that echoed off the study's walls. Nothing like the controlled, quiet laughter appropriate in temple settings. "And I hope it's okay that I came a day early. I was so excited I couldn't wait. I've been reading about your family's collection for months." "It's fine." His voice came out strangled. He cleared his throat, trying to center himself. "This is just surprise. You're not used to such direct Western manners." Breathe, but breathing didn't help. Because every breath brought her scent, something floral and warm, completely unlike the incense and wood smoke of the monastery. Something that made his body respond in ways he didn't understand. Have you ever met someone who made you feel things you didn't know you were capable of? Like your whole body just woke up for the first time. Drop a comment if you know exactly what Taejun is experiencing right now. Because besties, this man is about to have his entire world shaken. "I brought all my equipment," Ada continued, seemingly unaware of his distress. She gestured to the large case she'd set down by the door. "Digital cameras, measuring tools, archival gloves. I know these pieces are precious, so I'll be incredibly careful." "Mrs. Park said the artifacts are in the basement gallery?" "Yes." He managed to sound more normal. "I'll show you." He led her through the house, acutely aware of her presence behind him. She didn't walk quietly. Her shoes, flat, practical, but somehow still distinctly feminine, made soft sounds on the marble floors. She hummed under her breath, some melody he didn't recognize. When they passed the living room where family photos lined a credenza, she stopped. "Oh, is this your brother?" She pointed to the largest photo, Minjun at his wedding, grinning with Sujin. "Mrs. Park told me about the accident. I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you." The words were automatic, inadequate. "It must be incredibly hard." Her voice softened with genuine sympathy. "Taking over the family business, caring for his children. That's a lot of responsibility." He nodded, unable to speak. Unable to explain that the hardest part wasn't the responsibility but the guilt. The guilt that Minjun, who had loved life and family and every worldly thing Taejun had renounced, was dead. While Taejun, who had tried to transcend the world, was being forced back into it. Ada seemed to sense his discomfort. She touched his arm again, just a brief, comforting brush of her fingers against his sleeve. "I'll work quickly and stay out of your way. I know this is a difficult time." That touch, so casual for her, so catastrophic for him. His skin burned where her fingers had been, even through the fabric of his shirt. His pulse raced. He felt heat spreading through his body, centering in places that had been dormant for so long he'd forgotten they could feel anything at all. "The gallery," he said abruptly, moving away from her. "This way." Now, hours later, sitting by his nephew's bed in the dark, Taejun tried to make sense of what had happened. It was just surprise, cultural shock. He'd spent 10 years in an environment of men only, in a context where physical touch was rare and always formal. Of course, an ebullient, tactile woman from a completely different culture would be jarring. That's all it was. Except he could still feel where she'd touched him, could still hear her laugh, could still smell that floral scent, even though she'd left hours ago to settle into her hotel. He rose from Jaiwoo's bedside and returned to his room, the guest room he was using because he couldn't bring himself to take his brother's bedroom. The room was spare, almost monastic, because he'd removed most of the furniture. Just a mat on the floor where he slept, a small Buddha statue in the corner, his few possessions arranged neatly by the wall. He should meditate, center himself, find the stillness that had always been his refuge. Instead, he lay on the mat and stared at the ceiling, his body humming with an energy he couldn't name. An energy that felt suspiciously, terrifyingly, like desire. Ada returned the next morning at 9 o'clock sharp, wheeling a larger cart of equipment and carrying what appeared to be an enormous camera bag. She wore jeans today, practical and worn, with a loose white blouse that somehow managed to be both modest and utterly distracting. Her braids were pulled back in a thick ponytail, and she wore glasses he hadn't seen the day before, black-framed, slightly oversized, making her look both younger and more scholarly. Tae-jun had been awake since 4 a.m., meditating, or trying to. The session had been a disaster, his mind refusing to settle, his body refusing to forget the previous day's unexpected reactions. It's nothing, he told himself for the 100th time. You're adjusting to secular life. This is normal. Then Ada smiled at him, bright and genuine and completely unself-conscious, and his heart did that thing again. That pounding, racing thing that made him feel like he'd run up a mountain. Good morning. She was impossibly cheerful for so early. I brought coffee. Mrs. Park said you don't drink it, but I got you green tea from that cafe down the street. The owner is Korean, and she insisted you'd prefer this blend. She held out a cup, and when he took it, their fingers brushed, just for a second, just the smallest contact. Lightning. Actual lightning through his nervous system. He jerked his hand back, nearly dropping the tea. Hot liquid sloshed over the rim, burning his thumb. He barely felt it through the other sensations rioting through his body. Oh, Ada grabbed his hand without hesitation, examining the reddening skin. Are you okay? Let me get ice. I'm fine. He pulled away from her touch, his voice sharper than intended. Thank you for the tea. She blinked, clearly taken aback by his tone. A small line appeared between her brows. Of course. Sorry, I should have warned you the cup was hot. It's not your fault. He forced himself to sound calmer, more normal. Shall we begin? She studied him for a moment longer, and he had the uncomfortable sensation of being catalogued himself, assessed and archived. Then she seemed to mentally file away whatever she'd observed and returned to her bright professionalism. Absolutely. I'll start with the bronze pieces if that works. I understand you have several Goryeo dynasty items that are particularly rare. He led her down to the basement gallery, a climate-controlled space his grandfather had constructed specifically to house the family's collection. The room was large and well-lit, with glass cases lining the walls and freestanding displays in the center. Buddhist statues, prayer wheels, ancient sutras, ceremonial bells, pieces accumulated over generations, some inherited, some purchased, all precious. Ada stopped just inside the doorway, her mouth actually falling open. Oh my God. Is something wrong? Wrong. Tae-jun, can I call you Tae-jun? She didn't wait for an answer, too absorbed in what she was seeing. This is incredible. I knew your family had an important collection, but this is museum quality. Better than museum quality. Some museums would kill for even one of these pieces. She moved toward the nearest case, which held a bronze Maitreya from the unified Silla period. Her reflection appeared in the glass, her expression transformed from bright friendliness to something almost reverent. May I? Of course, that's why you're here. She pulled on a pair of white cotton gloves from her bag, then opened the case with careful precision. Her hands, which had been so casually tactile with him, became instruments of delicate precision. She lifted the small statue, no more than 8 inches tall, and cradled it like something alive. Look at this. Her voice was soft now, almost a whisper. The proportion, the detail in the crown, and this patina, it's authentic, not artificially aged. This has been handled with reverence for over 1,000 years. Tae-jun moved closer despite himself, drawn by the transformation in her voice. In the temple, he had lived surrounded by sacred objects, had polished and cared for statues and bells and prayer wheels. But he'd never heard someone speak about them the way Ada did, with academic precision combined with genuine wonder. The Maitreya, he said quietly, represents the future Buddha, the one who will come when the Dharma is forgotten to teach again. I know. She glanced at him, and there was something new in her eyes, respect, interest. You spent time in a monastery, didn't you? Mrs. Park mentioned it. 10 years, at Bayapjusa. That's one of the head temples of the Jaji order. She said it like someone who'd done her research, not someone making small talk. You must have studied extensively. Yes. Why did you leave? The question was direct, almost too direct, but her tone wasn't invasive, just curious, genuinely interested in him as a person, not as her client or an oddity. "My brother died, I'm needed here. But you didn't want to leave." It wasn't a question. Somehow, she'd read that truth in his face, in his voice, in the way he stood too formally in his own family's gallery. Want is irrelevant. This is my duty now. Ada was quiet for a moment, still holding the Maitreya. Then she said, "In Igbo culture, I'm Igbo, from southeastern Nigeria, we have a saying, Ani agana enwanya. Don't leave your brother behind. Family responsibility is everything. I understand duty." She replaced the statue carefully, then turned to face him fully. "But I also think wanting things is part of being human. Even the Buddha didn't transcend desire by pretending it didn't exist. He transcended it by understanding it fully first." The word struck something deep in his chest. In the temple, they had been taught to move beyond desire, to see it as the root of suffering. But they had done so by avoiding it, by removing themselves from situations where desire might arise. He had never learned to face it, to understand it, to experience it and choose to move beyond it. He was experiencing it now. Standing in this gallery, watching this woman handle sacred objects with reverent expertise, wearing those glasses that made her look impossibly both scholarly and beautiful, speaking about duty and desire with equal conviction. He was experiencing something that felt suspiciously like want. And it terrified him. "Besties, can we talk about how Ada just dropped wisdom on our monk? Understanding desire versus avoiding it. Have you ever avoided something instead of facing it? Comment below because I know you've been there. And T-Jun, baby, you're about to get a masterclass in what you've been running from. I should let you work," he said abruptly. "I have calls to make regarding the company." Of course. If she was hurt by his sudden retreat, she didn't show it. "I'll be here most of the day. Should I ask Mrs. Park if I need anything?" "Yes, or," he hesitated at the doorway, "or you can find me if you need anything." Her smile returned, warm and genuine. "Thank you. I promise I'll take good care of everything." He nodded and fled. There was no other word for it. He fled the gallery, fled the way her presence made the air feel charged and alive, fled the way his body responded to her like she was a flame, and he was something dry and waiting to burn. The next 3 days fell into an uncomfortable pattern. Ada arrived each morning at 9, always cheerful, always bringing tea she'd carefully selected. She worked in the gallery until late afternoon, photographing, measuring, taking detailed notes. She narrated what she was doing as she worked, not exactly talking to him. He often hovered in the doorway, pretending to review documents on his tablet, but not ignoring his presence either. Casual commentary about the pieces, observations about their historical context, questions about provenance that he sometimes could answer from family records. She was brilliant. That became obvious quickly. Her knowledge of Buddhist art was encyclopedic, but she wore it lightly, without pretension. She could read archaic Korean scripts on the bases of statues, identify regional style variations in bronze casting techniques, date pieces within decades based on iconographic details. And she was so alive. It wasn't just her laughter, though that came often. She found joy in everything, from a perfectly preserved prayer wheel to Mrs. Park's kimchi, which she'd tried at lunch and declared the best thing she'd ever eaten. It was her presence, the way she moved through space like someone who'd never been taught to make herself small or quiet or unobtrusive. Everything the temple had trained out of him, she embodied, and his body noticed. Oh, how his body noticed. On the 3rd day, Ada wore a dress. It was still modest by Western standards, high neck, hem to her knees, loose enough to be practical for crawling around examining statue bases. But it was red, deep, rich red like ceremonial robes. And it moved when she moved, and T-Jun couldn't stop watching the way the fabric swirled around her legs when she walked. He tried meditation that night. Full lotus position, focused breathing, emptying the mind. An hour passed. Then, too, his legs went numb, but his mind refused to empty. Instead, it filled with images he couldn't control. Her hands careful on bronze surfaces, her laugh echoing off gallery walls, that red dress moving like water, and worse things. Things he had no context for, no experience with. The monastery had separated monks from such thoughts so completely that he'd never really understood what desire meant physically. He'd read about it, heard oblique references in Dharma talks about the dangers of sexual attachment. But reading about something and feeling it in your body were entirely different. He was 30 years old, and he was experiencing puberty like a 14-year-old boy, with even less understanding of what was happening to him. The realization came to him sometime after midnight, still sitting in meditation position, though all pretense of actual meditation had long since vanished. His body was responding to Ada the way bodies respond to attraction. Sexual attraction. The thing he had assumed he'd transcended or never possessed strongly to begin with, or had successfully disciplined into permanent dormancy. He hadn't transcended anything. He'd just never been tested. And now, tested, he was failing catastrophically. The fourth day, Ada found him in the garden. It was early evening, the summer light golden and warm. She'd finished work for the day but hadn't left yet, and he'd retreated outside to escape the house that felt increasingly like a trap. The garden was his one refuge. His father had commissioned it in the traditional style, with carefully raked gravel and shaped pines, a small meditation pavilion by a koi pond. It was meant to evoke the serenity of temple grounds. It wasn't working. Nothing worked anymore. There you are. Her voice came from behind him, and he turned to find her standing on the stone path, still in her work clothes, today, jeans and a loose linen shirt the color of cream. She'd taken off her glasses, and without them, her eyes seemed larger, more direct. "Mrs. Park said you might be out here. I wanted to ask you something before I left." "Yes." He stood from where he'd been sitting on the pavilion steps, immediately aware that standing brought him closer to her. Close enough to catch that floral scent again. Close enough to see the light catching in her braids. "Some of the pieces in the collection have incomplete provenance records. I was hoping you might know more about the family history, specifically about your great-grandfather's time in Japan during the colonial period. Several items seem to have been acquired then." She had a small notebook in her hands, the physical kind rather than digital, its pages covered in neat handwriting. Professional, this was a professional question. He should be able to answer professionally. "My great-grandfather maintained journals. They're in storage somewhere in the house. I can ask Mrs. Park to locate them." "That would be wonderful." She smiled, tucking the notebook under her arm. "Thank you. I know I'm probably being a nuisance, needing so much information. You're not a nuisance." The words came out more forcefully than intended. Ada blinked, clearly surprised by his vehemence. "You're very good at what you do," he continued, trying to sound more measured. "Your work is thorough and respectful. The museum is fortunate to have you." Her smile softened into something warmer, more personal. "That's kind of you to say. I love this work. Every piece has a story, you know? Not just the historical context, but the personal stories. Someone made that statue with their hands 1,000 years ago. Someone prayed to it. Someone preserved it and passed it down. Objects carry the love of everyone who cared for them." She moved closer to him, unself-conscious about the proximity. Close enough that he could see the exact pattern of her braids, the small silver hoops in her ears. Close enough that when she gestured with her hands, describing the imagined journey of some ancient artifact, her fingers nearly brushed his chest. "Take that Maitreya," she said, enthusiasm building in her voice. "I found marks on the base that suggest it was carried, not displayed, carried. Someone took that statue with them when they traveled. Maybe a monk who couldn't bear to leave it behind. Maybe a family fleeing war. For over a millennium, people have held that peace and found comfort in it. That's what I love about this work. I'm not just cataloging objects. I'm witnessing devotion across time." She was radiant. That was the word that came to him. Not just beautiful, though she was that. Radiant with passion for her work, with genuine reverence for these objects he'd grown up with an aliveness that seemed to make the evening light brighter around her. And he wanted to touch her. The thought was so clear, so visceral, that it shocked him into stillness. He wanted to reach out and touch her face, her hand, pull her closer. He didn't even know. He had no template for this, no experience, no understanding of what his body was trying to tell him to do. "T-Jun," her voice was soft, concerned. "Are you all right? You look, I need to go inside." He stepped back, putting distance between them. "I apologize, I'm not feeling well." "Oh," her expression shifted to worry. "Can I get you anything? Water? Should I call Mrs. Park?" "No, thank you. I just need—" What did he need? "To rest. Excuse me." He left her standing in the garden, retreating into the house like a coward. He could feel her watching him go, could imagine the confusion in her eyes, the hurt she was probably too professional to show. But he couldn't stay. Couldn't stand there in the golden light with her talking about devotion and carrying things across centuries, not when his body was screaming with a desire he didn't understand and couldn't control. In his room, he sank to the floor and tried again to meditate, to find the discipline that had sustained him for 10 years, to transcend this thing that was happening to him. But the Buddha didn't come. No wisdom arose. No peace descended. There was only his racing heart, his flushed skin, and the persistent, terrifying awareness that what he felt was not going away. That meditation couldn't fix this. That discipline couldn't suppress it. That he was, for the first time in his adult life, experiencing genuine sexual desire. And he had absolutely no idea what to do with it. If you've ever felt completely out of your depth with your own feelings, like your body is doing things your brain can't understand, drop a blue heart in the comments. Because besties, T-Jun is struggling, and it's about to get so much more intense. This poor man spent 10 years avoiding this, and now it's hitting him all at once. Soo-jin found him at 6 a.m. the next morning, already in the home gym that Min-jun had built on the ground floor. T-jun had discovered that physical exhaustion helped. If he couldn't quiet his mind, he could at least tire his body. He'd been running on the treadmill for 40 minutes when his sister-in-law appeared in the doorway. "You're up early," she said, her voice flat with the depression that had settled over her like a shroud since the funeral. "Couldn't sleep." He slowed the machine to a walk, reaching for a towel. Soo-jin moved into the room, leaning against the weight rack. She looked thinner every time he saw her, her clothes hanging loose. "Mrs. Park says the curator is making good progress on the collection." "Yes, she's very competent. She's also very pretty." T-jun froze in the act of wiping his face. "I hadn't noticed." Liar, but there was no heat in it, just exhausted observation. Min-jun would have noticed. He always noticed pretty women. A pause. "I miss that about him, even the things that annoyed me. I'd give anything to be annoyed by him again." T-jun didn't know what to say. Comfort had never been his strength, so he said nothing, just let his sister-in-law have her grief. "The kids ask about you," Soo-jin continued after a moment. "They want to know when Uncle T-jun will play with them. They don't understand why you're always working or hiding in your room." Guilt stabbed through him. "I'm sorry. I'll spend more time with them." "That's not what I'm saying." She straightened, and for the first time in weeks, he saw a flash of the sharp, direct woman his brother had fallen in love with. "I'm saying you're allowed to live, T-jun. You left the monastery. You don't have to be a monk anymore." "I know." "Do you?" She tilted her head, studying him. "Because from where I'm standing, you're still living like one. You've turned the guest room into a cell. You barely eat. You work yourself to exhaustion. You're so busy being disciplined that you've forgotten how to be human." "This is who I am." "No." Her voice was sharp now. "This is who you became at 18 because you were traumatized by our parents fighting and Min-jun getting all the attention and the pressure of being a Kim. You ran away to the monastery to escape, and you're still running even though you're back home." The words hit like physical blows. He stepped off the treadmill, breathing hard, not from exercise now, but from the accuracy of her assessment. "I didn't run away, I sought enlightenment." "You sought escape," Soo-jin corrected, "and I'm not judging you for it. God knows I've wanted to escape plenty of times, but Min-jun is dead, T-jun. We don't get to escape anymore. We have to be here, present, alive, for the kids, for the company, for ourselves. I am here. Your body is here. Your mind is still in that temple." She moved toward the door, then paused. "That curator, Ada. She's vibrant and alive, and everything this house needs right now. Don't push her away just because she reminds you that you're still capable of feeling things." She left before he could respond. Left him standing alone in the gym, chest heaving, her words echoing in his head. You're still capable of feeling things. That was the problem. He was feeling too much. Ada didn't arrive at her usual time that morning. 9 o'clock came and went. Then 9:30. By 10, T-jun was pacing his study, trying to focus on email and failing completely. Had he offended her so badly yesterday that she decided to quit the project? Was she ill? Had something happened? He was halfway to asking Mrs. Park to call her hotel when his phone buzzed with an email. "Mr. Kim, I apologize for the late start today. I had a video call with the museum that ran long. They're very excited about what we're finding in your collection. I should be there by 11. Thank you for your patience. Best, Ada relief flooded through him, so strong it left him momentarily weak, which was absurd. Why should it matter if she came at 9 or 11? Why should her absence make him feel unmoored? Because you're attracted to her, a small, honest voice in his head answered. Because you look forward to seeing her. Because she's become the brightest part of your days. He sat heavily in his desk chair. This had to stop. He couldn't continue like this, wound tight as a prayer drum, hyper-aware of her every movement, his body responding to her proximity like she was the sun and he was photosynthesizing. He needed to address this. Control it, transcend it, or, and this thought was so foreign it felt almost heretical, understand it. The Buddha didn't transcend desire by pretending it didn't exist. He transcended it by understanding it fully first. Her words from days ago, maybe she was right. Maybe his problem was that he'd never actually faced desire, never understood it. He'd avoided it for 10 years, and now it had ambushed him with no warning and no defense. When Ada arrived just after 11, he was ready. Or thought he was. She wheeled her equipment cart down the hallway with her usual energy, wearing dark jeans and a loose gray sweater despite the summer heat. The gallery was kept cool for preservation. Her braids were down today, framing her face, and she wore those glasses again. "Good morning," she smiled, but it was slightly more reserved than usual. "Sorry again for the delay." The museum curator had a million questions about the Joseon-era prayer wheels. "It's fine." He stood from where he'd been waiting in the hallway. "Ada, may I speak with you before you begin work?" Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Of course, is something wrong?" "No, just." He gestured toward his study. "Please." She followed him, leaving her equipment in the hall. He could feel her curiosity, probably mixed with concern. He was breaking their pattern, and she was wondering why. In the study, he closed the door, immediately realized that might seem inappropriate, and opened it again slightly. Ada watched this internal debate with something that might have been amusement. "Taejun, what's going on? I need to apologize." The words came out stiff, formal. "For my behavior the past few days, I've been distant, abrupt. If I've made you uncomfortable, that wasn't my intention." "Oh," she looked genuinely surprised. "I mean, you have been a bit intense, but I figured you were dealing with a lot. The company, your family, the grief. I wasn't taking it personally." "You should." He forced himself to meet her eyes. It was personal. "I was." How did he explain this? "You make me uncomfortable." Her expression shifted, hurt flashing across her features before she could hide it. "I see. Would you prefer I work at different hours? Or I can try to be quieter, less?" "No." He held up a hand, realizing he was explaining this badly. "Not that kind of uncomfortable. You're not doing anything wrong. The problem is me. I don't understand. I spent 10 years in a monastery," he said slowly, trying to find words for something he barely understood himself. 10 years learning discipline, control, transcendence. I thought I had succeeded. And then you arrived, and I realized I haven't transcended anything. I just avoided ever being tested." Ada was very still, watching him with those intelligent eyes. "Tested how?" His face heated. He could feel the flush rising from his collar, mortifying in someone with his pale complexion. "I'm attracted to you." The words hung in the air between them. He couldn't believe he'd said them out loud. 10 years of meditation and discipline, shattered by 3 words and a blushing confession that made him feel like an adolescent. "Oh," Ada said softly. Then, after a beat, "Oh, I apologize. This is completely inappropriate. You're here to work and I'm your client and I should have better control." "Wait." She held up a hand, a smile starting to curve her lips. "Let me make sure I understand. You've been weird and distant because you're attracted to me? Like, you like me?" "Yes." The word came out strangled. "And this is, bad, a problem? I took vows, celibacy. I've broken them just by feeling this way." "You left the monastery," she pointed out gently. "Doesn't that mean the vows no longer apply?" "I didn't want to leave. I would still be there if my brother hadn't died. The vows should still apply to my heart, even if circumstances forced me back into the world." Ada studied him for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. Then she moved to the leather armchair by his desk and sat down, gesturing for him to sit as well. "Can we talk about this? Really talk?" Taejun remained standing, too agitated to sit. "What is there to talk about? I've made you uncomfortable." You haven't. Her voice was firm. Sit down, Taejun, please, he sat. Years of monastic obedience made refusing a direct request nearly impossible. Okay, Ada said, folding her hands in her lap. First, I want to say thank you for being honest with me. That took courage. She paused. Second, I need you to understand something. Where I come from, both Nigerian culture and my own personal beliefs, attraction isn't a sin. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's human. Buddhism teaches that desire is the root of suffering. Buddhism teaches that attachment to desire causes suffering, she corrected gently. There's a difference. You can feel attraction without being enslaved by it. You can acknowledge what you feel without acting on it inappropriately. She leaned forward slightly. What you're describing, this guilt, this shame, this feeling that you've failed by simply feeling something, that's not transcendence. That's repression. It's discipline. Is it? Her eyes were kind but challenging. Because from where I'm sitting, discipline means having control over your actions. What you're talking about is trying to control your feelings. And feelings don't work that way. They just are. Taejun felt something crack inside his chest. For 10 years, he'd been taught to observe feelings without attachment, to let them arise and pass like clouds. But he'd never been taught to simply accept them, especially not feelings like this. I don't know what to do with what I feel, he admitted quietly. I have no experience with this. At 18, I entered the monastery. I never dated, never, anything. And now I'm 30 years old, and I feel like I'm discovering something fundamental about being human that everyone else learned as teenagers. Understanding bloomed in Ada's expression. Oh, Taejun, you're not broken or failing. You're just learning later than some people, but that doesn't make it wrong. It feels overwhelming. Attraction usually does, especially the first time. She smiled softly. Can I tell you something? I find you attractive too. His head snapped up, shock coursing through him. What? You're a good-looking man, she said matter-of-factly. Tall, handsome, those cheekbones could cut glass. But more than that, you're intelligent and thoughtful. The way you talk about the artifacts, about your spiritual practice, about your family, it's compelling. And yes, there's something appealing about someone so disciplined slowly coming undone. Heat flooded his face, his entire body. I don't understand why you're telling me this. Because I want you to know that attraction is mutual, and it's okay. She stood, moving closer to him, though she maintained a respectful distance. I'm not going to act on it because that would be inappropriate while I'm working for you. Professional boundaries matter. But after I'm done with the catalog, if you wanted to have dinner to get to know each other outside of this context, I would say yes. You would. I would. Her smile widened. But Taejun, you need to understand something. I'm not interested in being the woman who corrupts the monk or whatever romantic fantasy that is. If we're going to explore this, whatever this is, you need to make peace with your own desires first. Not transcend them, not suppress them. Actually understand them and decide what you want. I don't know how to do that. Then learn. She said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. You spent 10 years learning to meditate, to control your breathing, to understand Buddhist philosophy. You can spend some time learning to understand desire, not as something to conquer, but as something to know. And how do I do that? Ada pulled out her phone, typed something, then showed him the screen. It was a list of book titles, academic texts on human sexuality, psychology of desire, even some Buddhist perspectives on integrating spiritual practice with embodied experience. Start here, she said. Read, learn. Figure out what you actually want, not what you think you should want based on vows you took when you were 18 and heartbroken. The observations stung because it was accurate. Sujin said something similar this morning, that I ran away to the monastery to escape. Did you? He thought about it, really thought about it for the first time in years. Maybe. My parents were fighting constantly. Minjun was clearly the favored son, the heir. I felt invisible and pressured simultaneously. The monastery offered peace. And now the monastery feels like a different life, like it happened to someone else. The admission hurt. I spent a decade becoming someone, and now I don't know who I'm supposed to be. Maybe you're supposed to be yourself, Ada said softly. Not the monk, not the dutiful son, not the substitute heir, just Taejun, but you have to figure out who that is. Besties, can we appreciate Ada right now? She just gave Taejun the most beautiful permission to be human. If someone has ever told you, It's okay to feel what you feel. Drop a comment and tell us about it. Because this is the conversation Taejun has needed for 10 years. She left him with the reading list and returned to work in the gallery. Taejun spent the rest of the day in his study, ostensibly reviewing business documents, actually staring at his phone where he'd saved her book recommendations. Psychology of Sexual Development, Buddhism and Embodied Experience. The body keeps the score. He downloaded the first one and started reading. Within pages, he was riveted. Not because the content was salacious, it was actually quite clinical, but because it was describing experiences he was having, giving them names and context. The physical symptoms of attraction, the neurochemistry of desire, the psychological development of sexual identity. He'd missed all of this. While his peers were fumbling through adolescent relationships, learning their body's responses, discovering what they wanted and didn't want, he'd been in a monastery, deliberately avoiding all of it. He was 30 years old with the sexual development of a sheltered teenager. The realization should have been humiliating. Instead, it was oddly freeing. Because if this was normal, if what he was experiencing had a name, a process, a developmental trajectory, then maybe he wasn't failing. Maybe he was just learning. Late that afternoon, Mrs. Park knocked on his study door. "Sir, Miss Okonkwo is leaving for the day. She wanted to say goodbye." Taejun found Ada in the foyer, packing her equipment. She looked up when he approached, and her smile was warm, open, with none of the reservation from earlier. "I made good progress today," she said. "I'm about halfway through the bronze collection. Tomorrow I'll start on the ceremonial instruments." "Good." He hesitated then. "Thank you, for this morning, for being honest with me. Thank you for trusting me with what you're going through." She pulled her bag onto her shoulder. "Have a good evening, Taejun, and read those books. I promise they'll help." After she left, he did read. For hours, sitting in his room with the door closed, absorbing information about human sexuality and psychological development that felt both foreign and intimately familiar. The books talked about desire as a natural part of human experience, about the importance of understanding your own responses, about the difference between attraction and action. One passage in particular struck him. Sexual shame often results from the belief that feeling desire is equivalent to acting on it. In reality, humans feel attracted to many people throughout their lives. Healthy sexual development involves learning to acknowledge these feelings without judgment while consciously choosing how to respond to them. He could acknowledge what he felt for Ada. He could recognize the attraction without being ashamed of it. And he could choose, consciously, deliberately, what to do with those feelings. The question was, what did he want to do? The next morning, Taejun woke to small hands shaking his shoulder. Uncle Taejun, wake up." He opened his eyes to find both Jaiwoo and Hana standing beside his sleeping mat, dressed in mismatched pajamas, hair sticking up in all directions. The clock on the wall read 6:30 a.m. "What's wrong?" He sat up quickly, immediately alert. "Did something happen?" "Halmione is making pancakes," Hana announced. Using the Korean word for grandmother, she meant Mrs. Park, who'd become a surrogate grandmother to Minjun's children. "She said we could wake you up. We never see you anymore," Jaiwoo added, his voice small. "Are you mad at us?" The question hit like a physical blow. "No, never. I could never be mad at you." "Then, why don't you play with us?" Hana's lower lip trembled. "Appa used to play with us every morning before work." Guilt crashed over him. These children had lost their father, and Taejun had been so consumed with his own confusion and the company's demands that he'd neglected them. Soojin was right. He was still running away, even while standing still. "I'm sorry," he said, reaching out to pull both children into a hug. They came willingly, Jaiwoo careful as always, Hana throwing herself against his chest with abandon. "You're right, I haven't been spending enough time with you. That changes today." "Really?" Jaiwoo's eyes were hopeful. "Really, starting with pancakes." He stood, lifting Hana onto his hip, something that would have felt impossible a few weeks ago, but was becoming more natural. "And then maybe we can play in the garden before I have to work." Both children cheered, and for the first time since returning from the monastery, Taejun felt something like joy. Breakfast was chaotic in the way that meals with young children always are. Hana got syrup in her hair. Jaiwoo told a rambling story about a dream involving robot dinosaurs. Sujin appeared halfway through, looking more rested than she had in weeks, and her eyes softened when she saw Taejun with both children chattering at him simultaneously. "You're good with them," she said quietly, sitting down with coffee. "I'm learning." Minjun had to learn too. He was terrified when Jaiwoo was born, convinced he'd break him. She smiled at the memory, bittersweet, but he figured it out. "You will too." After breakfast, Taejun took the children to the garden. They played hide-and-seek among the carefully manicured shrubs, which Jaiwoo pointed out was against the garden rules, but he was giggling too hard to really object. They fed the koi fish, with Hana insisting on naming each one despite them being identical. They sat in the pavilion, and Taejun told them simplified Buddhist stories about compassion and kindness that he remembered from his novice days. He was so absorbed that he didn't hear Ada arrive until her voice came from the stone path. "This looks like way more fun than cataloging artifacts." All three of them turned. Ada stood there in jeans and a loose green blouse, her equipment cart abandoned behind her, a wide smile on her face. "The pretty lady," Hana exclaimed, wiggling out of Taejun's lap to run toward Ada. "Are you Uncle's friend?" "Hana," Taejun started, mortified, but Ada just laughed, crouching down to Hana's level. My name is Ada, what's yours?" "Hana, I'm 3, she held up 4 fingers. 4, Jaiwoo corrected quietly, coming to stand beside his sister, but maintaining more distance from the stranger. "She's not good at counting yet." "That's okay. I wasn't good at counting when I was 3 either." Ada's smile was warm, inclusive. "And what's your name?" "Jaiwoo, I'm 5. 5 is a very good age. That's when I learned to ride a bicycle." She glanced up at Taejun, still sitting in the pavilion. "I'm sorry to interrupt. Mrs. Park said you were out here, and I wanted to ask about those journals you mentioned, your great-grandfather's records. But this looks important." "It is," Taejun said, surprising himself. "But you're not interrupting. The journals are in storage. I'll get them after lunch." "No rush." Ada straightened, but Hana immediately grabbed her hand. "Do you want to feed the fish? Uncle says they're ancient and wise, but I think they just like food." Ada glanced at Taejun, silently asking permission. He nodded, and she allowed Hana to drag her toward the pond, Jaiwoo trailing behind more cautiously. Watching her interact with the children, patient with Hana's exuberance, gentle with Jaiwoo's shyness, something shifted in Taejun's chest. This wasn't just attraction, he realized. It was deeper than physical desire. He liked her. Her kindness, her warmth, the way she made everything around her feel more alive. "She's very pretty," Jaiwoo announced, appearing suddenly at Taejun's elbow with his characteristic silence. "Is she your girlfriend?" "No," Taejun said automatically. Then, more thoughtfully, "Not yet." Jaiwoo considered this with 5-year-old seriousness. "But you want her to be?" "Maybe. If she wants that too." "You should give her flowers," Jaiwoo advised sagely. "That's what Appa did when he was trying to make Iyama happy." "That's good advice." They rejoined Ada and Hana at the pond, where Ada was explaining the symbolism of koi fish in different cultures, Korean, Japanese, Chinese, in terms simple enough for a 3-year-old to understand, but accurate enough to satisfy Taejun's own knowledge. "In my culture in Nigeria," she was saying, "we don't have koi, but we have a fish called tilapia. It's very important because it feeds many people. Different fish, but similar importance, something that sustains life." "What else is different in Nigeria?" Jaiwoo asked, his natural curiosity overcoming his shyness. "Lots of things. The weather is much warmer. We have different animals, lions and elephants in some places. We speak different languages. I speak Igbo and English. Can you say something in Igbo?" "Like what?" "Kedu, that means how are you?" "Kedu," Jaiwoo tried, stumbling slightly over the pronunciation. "Perfect, and you answer." "Adam MMA, which means I'm fine." Soon both children were repeating basic Igbo phrases, giggling at the unfamiliar sounds. Ada was a natural teacher, patient and encouraging, making learning feel like play. Taejun found himself watching her more than the children, memorizing the way her face animated when she spoke, the gesture of her hands, the music of her laughter. Mrs. Park appeared on the path, announcing lunch. The children groaned but obediently headed inside, Jaiwoo pausing to bow politely to Ada, good manners his parents had instilled, and Hana throwing her arms around Ada's legs in an impulsive hug before running after her brother. "They're wonderful," Ada said, watching them go. You can see how loved they are, she corrected quickly, by you and their mother. They're resilient, more than I expected. Children often are. They grieve differently than adults, but not less deeply. She turned to face him fully. You're good with them, natural. I don't feel natural. I feel like I'm constantly one mistake away from breaking something. That's called being a parent, Ada said with a gentle smile. Or a parent figure in your case. The fact that you worry about it means you care. That's what matters. They walked slowly back toward the house, the summer air warm and thick with the scent of flowers from the garden. Tae-jun found himself acutely aware of her presence beside him, not overwhelming anymore, just present, real, human. I read the first book you recommended, he said abruptly. Last night. Her eyebrows rose with interest. And it was illuminating, clinical, but helpful. It explained a lot of what I've been experiencing. He hesitated. I've been thinking about what you said, about learning to understand desire rather than transcending it. And what have you concluded? That I don't know how to do that, but I want to learn. He stopped walking, turning to face her. After you finish the catalog, would you have dinner with me, not as my employee, as yourself, so I can get to know you properly? Ada's smile was radiant. I would love that. The catalog should be finished in about 2 weeks. How about we say 3 weeks from today? That gives you time to process, and me time to finish the work without any awkwardness. 3 weeks, he agreed. That sounds reasonable. Good. She stepped closer, not inappropriate, but friendly, warm. In the meantime, keep reading, keep thinking. And Tae-jun, don't be so hard on yourself. You're doing fine. Besties, 3 weeks. They have a date planned for 3 weeks. But you know that's a long time when you're falling for someone. Comment below, team take it slow or team just kiss already. Because I'm watching Tae-jun try to be patient and I'm like, baby, life is short. That evening, after Ada had left and the children were in bed, Tae-jun sat in his room with the second book from her list open on his lap. But he wasn't reading. He was thinking about 3 weeks. About dinners and getting to know someone. About the possibility of something more. His phone buzzed. A text from Ada. Thank you for today. Playing with the kids, being honest with me about what you're feeling. You're braver than you think. He stared at the message, his heart doing that thing again. That racing, pounding thing that no longer felt quite so terrifying. He typed back, thank you for being patient with me, for teaching me. Her response came quickly. You're worth the patience. See you tomorrow. Tae-jun set down the phone and lay back on his mat, staring at the ceiling. 3 weeks until their dinner. 3 weeks to figure out who he was beyond the monk, beyond the dutiful son, beyond all the roles he'd been playing. 3 weeks to learn to be human. He closed his eyes, and for the first time since leaving the monastery, he didn't try to meditate his feelings away. He just let himself feel them. The attraction, the nervousness, the hope. And somewhere in the darkness of his room, he smiled. Welcome back, besties. If you're sitting there with your heart racing, wondering what happens next, good. That's exactly where I want you. Tae-jun just took the biggest step of his life. He confessed his feelings. He admitted he's attracted to Ada. And she said yes to dinner. But 3 weeks is a long time when you're discovering desire for the first time in your life. In part 2, things are about to get intense. Because Tae-jun is going to learn what it really means to want someone. And Ada, she's going to show him that being human isn't something to be ashamed of, it's something to celebrate. We're talking about tension you can cut with a knife. We're talking about moments that will make you scream at your screen. We're talking about a monk learning to be a man, and a woman teaching him that love and desire aren't weaknesses, they're what make us whole. If you're invested in this story, hit that subscribe button right now. Because part 2 drops soon, and trust me, you do not want to miss what happens when Tae-jun starts actually acting on these feelings he's been discovering. Drop a comment telling me, are you Team Ada or Team Tae-jun? Trick question, you should be team both. Have you ever discovered something about yourself later in life that everyone else learned as teenagers? What do you think happens in those 3 weeks before the dinner? And here's the real question, besties. Do you think they're actually going to wait 3 weeks? Because I'm looking at these two, at this chemistry, at the way Tae-jun's whole world just got turned upside down. And I'm thinking 3 weeks might be optimistic. Just saying. Like this video if Tae-jun's confession had you feeling things. Comment if you're already obsessed with Ada. And share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to discover who you really are.